there's some good ripples coming out. James talks about, can sweet water and sour water come from the same stream? Well, sometimes it does, doesn't it? Whatever we do is a ripple. There are great leaders out there. They're not necessarily leading great. Hitler was a good leader. He was a great leader. He was not, and as far as leadership is concerned, but he didn't lead the right path. He wasn't leading down the right paths. But he was a great leader. Tremendous following. So, and sometimes we think, oh, what I do in my own little corner isn't going to ripple out. It's not going to have much of an effect. You know, we have no idea.
Depends on where God throws the stone, right?
Oh, God don't throw stones in bad places. I mean, it's you're fine. It's going to ripple out. We have no idea. I doubt if John Wesley, Charles Wesley, and his mother knew that these two would have such an impact on, I mean, that's where the Methodist Church comes from, the Wesleyan Church comes from. There's so much that is just rippled out. We have no idea the little things that we might do, what impact that it has. Just think back in your life. There was a teacher back then that said something. Somebody said something along the way, and all of a sudden, it was a defining moment. Jesus in the New Testament gives us a succinct, clear answer how to best live this life. Last week we talked about God has called us to be a servant. One spot in here. There we go. Jesus calls us to be a servant, being a servant. And throughout the New Testament, Paul here introduces himself in his letters, a servant of Jesus Christ. Same thing with James, same thing with Simon Peter. John in Revelation talks about himself as the servant John. Servanthood. And Jesus up at the top there, this is what the Son of Man has done. He came to serve, not to be served, then to give away his life in exchange for many who are held hostage. Servant. To be a servant. Greatest is the least, Jesus said. Greatest is the servant of all. This is the upside down kingdom. If you give away your life to Jesus, you'll find life. If you hold on to your life, you'll lose life. If you give, it will be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. If you hold on, you'll lose it. This is the upside down kingdom. The scary part is that we can know Jesus, talk with Jesus, use Jesus' jargon, be busy serving in the church, listening to the sermon, even preaching the sermon, and still be utterly callous and self-serving, driven by ambition or lust and power, not by the Spirit of Jesus. This is true. What is the driving force? I'm doing this because I'm serving Jesus. And out of serving Jesus, we serve others. The toughest part of being a servant is releasing the I, getting our ego out of the way. Isn't that right? The middle letter of sin is I. Isn't that right? It's all about me. It's all about how I feel. Getting our ego out of the way. Servanthood is love. And before we love, we have to release our big, fat, all-consuming ego. The demand that the world should really revolve around me. My needs, my preferences, my wants, my thoughts, my ideas. Me, myself, and I. And in that story where Jesus talked about the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, it came out of that story, and we talked about it last week, where James and John came up to Jesus and said, hey, when we come into your kingdom, guess what? It's about me. I want to sit at your right hand, and the other one's at your left. And Jesus just, time out. We need to call a timeout, and the troops are lost. They're going down the wrong way. And he had a little conference right there, and he began to talk to them. James and John, the rest of the disciples, are focused on their own personal agenda. So Jesus said, you have no idea what you're asking. If I was sitting on the right hand and sitting on the left? The idea of Jesus is how you get to greatness, you descend into greatness. By being humble. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? Can you do what I've done? John Maxwell is a well-known speaker. He speaks in front of thousands. He talks about leadership. And he recalls this one occasion when, because the crowd's just kind of in his hand and he's talking and people are laughing and joking and people are having a good time, and they had a break. And this guy from the audience comes up to him and said, John, I would like to do what you do. He says, is that right? He says, you can do it. You know how you can do what I do? You have to have done what I've done to be able to do what I do. Who wouldn't like, he says, who wouldn't like to be in front of the whole crowd and everybody is riveted and all that? And he says, who wouldn't like that? But you just don't go there. There's a huge cost to be able to get to that place. So when Jesus says, you have no idea, to sit at my right hand, to sit at my left, guess what's going to happen? Oh my goodness. He says, don't you realize my mission runs right through the cross? Following me isn't about your comfort. Do you really want my mission? Do you really want to sit next to me? There's a huge cost. Well, Lord, at least can I sneak into heaven? I'm not sure how you sneak into heaven. I'm not sure how that happens. You ever have a balloon?
Yep.
And if that balloon, have you ever taken a balloon and tried to squeeze that thing?
Yep.
See, how close can I get before it pops? To squeeze it. How? And some of us live our Christian life that way. How far, what can I actually do and still get into heaven? Instead of releasing it and saying, how much can I serve Jesus? Instead of how much can I get away with? We're called to be servants. This is who we are. In the Gospels, Jesus gives this illustration. I'm going to modernize it a little bit, but it's the same thing. It's actually what somebody actually did. It was a businessman. It was around Christmas time. He realized decided to throw a party for a lot of his clients. And he shared no expense. He hired, yeah, he spared no expense, yeah. He hired one of the most expensive caterers in Chicago. He rented out the McCormick Center. He paid an army of uninformed waitstaff to serve his guests with silver trays. He commissioned an artisan to carve an ice sculpture. The swan had it floating in this lake of punch. Engraved invitations were handed out far in advance, hand-delivered by special messengers in time for everyone to clear their calendars. But somehow the hour came for the party to begin, and the host, guess what? Found himself alone. Not one guest bothered to come. Not even the mayor. Mayor Daley didn't even show up. After an hour, the host asked his assistant to get the guest list, and he began making phone calls. The first person his assistant called was very apologetic. She said she intended to come, but just as she was about to leave for the party, the realtor called to say that the offer she placed on the piece of property had been accepted, and they needed to close the deal, so she didn't come. And the woman decided it was only prudent to take one last look at the property before signing the papers. She sincerely hoped the host would understand. The second person, the assistant, called, was deeply apologetic and a little embarrassed. I really meant to be there. But yesterday, the Toyota dealer called me to tell me my hybrid had finally arrived. You wouldn't believe how long the waiting list was for the car, so anyway, the dealer said I could take delivery of the car today or wait another 6 months. So I took it for a test drive and I bought it. I was having so much fun with my friends, and the party slipped my mind. I was just driving my car. The next person the assistant phoned didn't even bother to apologize. In fact, he was quite abrupt on the phone. He said that he and his wife had just come back from their honeymoon and didn't want to be bothered. Turns out they had just had their first fight as a married couple. They were on the verge of making up and wanting to be alone. It went on like this until the assistant had called everyone on the guest list. Everybody, it seemed, had some kind of excuse. When the assistant went back and reported the disappointing news, the host was understandably angry. What was he supposed to do? The convention center was already booked, the deposit was non-refundable, the food was already prepared, the ice swan was starting to melt. Suddenly the host got a flash of inspiration. He remembered that on his way to the McCormick Center, he passed a group of homeless people, and he called the assistant over. He says, go out there and tell them that there's a free meal for them in here. And it didn't take long for the word to spread on the street, and soon there was quite a crowd filing sheepishly in the front door. But even with these newcomers, there was still plenty of food, and most of it was in danger to go to waste. Looking at one of the street people enjoying the hors d'oeuvres, another flash of inspiration came to the business, and he said, call the homeless shelters. Bring them in here. Tell the people to bring all their people down here for dinner. In the meantime, the guest who had purchased the new Toyota happened to drive by the McCormick Center on the way home. Feeling guilty, they decided to show up at the last minute. They'd been out driving the car all day, but they didn't have their tuxedo. But he thought, well, better late than never. When he saw the ragged-looking crowd sitting at the tables, he thought he had come to the wrong place. But then he saw the host standing in the corner and went over to him and made his presence known. Instead of being happy to see his guest, the host was angry. He called for the security and had the guest ejected from the party. The host said, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. So it was the story that Jesus talks about in the Gospels. It's the same story. Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast of the kingdom of God. This is in Luke. replied, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent a servant to tell those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, I just bought a field, I must go and see it. Please excuse me. Another said, I just bought the 5 yoke of oxen on the way to try them out. Please excuse me. Still another said, I just got married, so I can't come. The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, go out quickly to the streets and the alleys of the town, bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. Sir, the servant said, what you ordered has been done, but there is still room. Then the master told his servant, go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. And then in Matthew, Jesus says, true, I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are in the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to show you the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes did, and even after you saw this, you did not repent and believe. Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to the people who will produce its fruit. What's this illustration about? What's the story about? And the moral of the story is? Get in little groups, let's talk about it. And the moral of the story is? Remember, Jesus has called us. There's a call in here somewhere. What's he called us to? What's he saying? This is just an illustration. It's a parable. And a parable is what?